Welcome to the Costa Rica Travel and Living Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Baker. This is your podcast that discusses everything travel, living, and work related here in this part of the world in Central America, coming directly to you from San Jose, Costa Rica. Guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, please give us a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so wherever you get your podcasts. This week's guest is a good friend of mine who I've known for nearly 20 years. He's already been on the podcast once a few months ago. Richard Bexon jumps on to have a chat with me once more. Richard's been in Costa Rica for over 20 years, is an entrepreneur of many businesses, and established a big part of the Costa Rican Vacations Travel Agency, has since established smaller businesses, and is currently running a very successful investment business since the pandemic over the last few years. Richard is the guy you need to go to if you're thinking about investing or want to discuss anything regarding real estate. If you haven't listened to his podcast yet, don't forget to jump over to the Costa Rica Real Estate and Investments podcast, as you will certainly learn a thing or two. We have a great conversation today about starting your business here in Costa Rica. It's quite a subject, something that comes up an awful lot regarding accountants, lawyers, the tax system. We get into it. If you have questions for me, please don't forget to write them in the description box below if you're watching on YouTube. You can find Richard's information as well wherever you get this podcast if you want to reach out to Richard directly. Guys, it's a fantastic conversation. I highly recommend sticking with us. So without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Richard. Good afternoon, Richard. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, Adam. It's an absolute pleasure to be on your podcast. It's, I've got one that does it every week, and it's weird to actually be on somebody else's podcast.
Again, thanks for coming on. I remember we spoke to you about 3 months ago, specifically in real estate and investing. We're going to touch on that topic today, as mentioned. How is your podcast going? How many episodes are you on now?
I think I'm just after this. I'm about to record 231.
231. We're recording this at the end of December 2024. I'm sure you've got some exciting episodes coming up into 2025. If someone wanted to find your podcast, where can they go?
I mean, they could just go online and just type in a Costa Rica real estate and investing podcast and find it on Spotify and YouTube. And, we interview a wide variety of people. It's not just, it's about running businesses, which is kind of what we'll talk about in a minute. From investing, people that have businesses here, property managers, realtors, lawyers, diplomats, like everything, man.
It's a great podcast, guys. If you are interested, especially about investing here with the real estate scene in Costa Rica and even growing your business, as we're going to discuss today. Richard is an entrepreneur who's been here for over 2 decades. I've known Richard for a very large portion of that. I'm quite grateful, as mentioned, for starting an old job here in the travel sector about 18 years ago now, which seems like a very long time ago when I think back to it. But yeah, I'm sure you guys are keen for us to get going. And today we are going to discuss how to grow your business as a foreigner, as a startup. It could be any business. We're going to focus on chatting to Richard. Richard was absolutely essential in getting the Costa Rica holiday brand of Costa Rican Vacations going. As I mentioned a long time ago, has started many separate businesses. I remember your Bissy Box. Traveling, getting boxes around the country.
Still going.
Entrepreneur, still going. And now, of course, Costa Rica investments. Very exciting. So I guess the biggest question, and this is the one that may go on a little bit, but is what are the key steps to starting a business here in Costa Rica specifically and as a foreigner? How do you begin?
Take a deep breath and have patience. Exactly. Well, I think I think if you speak Spanish, it's a lot easier. If you don't, ask a lawyer to kind of help you. I mean, number one, of course, is form a corporation. I'm talking from a structural point of view here as well. But I mean, if you've got an idea, personally, what I would probably do is maybe not start the corporation first. I would just test the waters, get a minimal viable product out there without it, and just see if it works. Just because I think a lot of people get too involved in all of the structure and legalities and operation without seeing if it'll work. It's a very different country, and things work very different here. There are things here that work and things that don't. I had someone the other day that was like Mercado Libre, which is huge in Mexico, tried to come into Costa Rica, but couldn't work here. Mercado Libre is like a marketplace, a Facebook marketplace, and it just couldn't break Facebook Marketplace.
Why do you think that was specifically with such a large brand?
Well, I mean, it's look, they were late to the party. There's Encuentro 24, there's Facebook Marketplace, there was
Yeah.
Craigslist before that, and so kind of a little late to the party. So, I mean, trying to grab everyone's attention is very, very difficult. So I think it's usually like if you're the first or second, it's a lot easier than being fourth. And they weren't really offering anything else that someone was offering. That being said, I think Costa Rica is kind of the Garden of Eden. And I always say, hay plata en el calle, there's money in the street here. So any idea, or if someone's doing something and you think you could do it better, could very much work here. You're just going to have patience with most things, and I think everybody wants a business. They just want to run in and make money straight off the bat. And I can tell you look, man, I love the saying, like extraordinary things are done by ordinary people doing ordinary tasks over an extraordinary long period of time. So you better be willing to do it for an extraordinary long period of time. I mean, I've been here for 20 years in Costa Rica. You've been here, 18 years. So, actually even more than that. I think you've been here the same amount of time as me, nearly 20 years.
So, two decades. Yeah.
And I'd probably say that you only really start to get successful after like 10 or 12 years here, so you just need to be willing to do that. But going back to the structure, I would try and advertise it on Facebook, build a really simple website, drive some AdWords to it just to make sure it makes sense. If you start getting clients, then go, okay, I better structure this thing right. Get a corporation set up, and there are multiple different. You can have a SRL, as they call it, when you only need one member. You can have a Sociedad Anónima, where you'll need multiple. I think it's like 2 or 3 different members of it. Personally, if it's just an individual business, I do an SRL. So you can just ask your kind of lawyer about that. It's a much simpler structure, very much easier, and they'll have it set up in 3 days for you.
And what is that? Let's hold there. What does that entail? So you've made a really good point. Make sure you have a viable product that brings value to a potential audience. If you're there first or second, you've got a really good chance. And if you want to test the water to compete in a market that's already perhaps saturated, have patience. Make sure you're passionate. Make sure you're in it for the long run. It's not going to be a quick turnaround. You might not see a return inside a year. You're already established in Costa Rica. So you're a foreigner. Maybe you've been here for a couple of years. So when you say set up a corporation, speak to the lawyer, what does that mean? Well, break that down in simple terms.
Just find any lawyer, any notary in Costa Rica, and they can just be like, I want to open a corporation. The corporation is going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm the only member. So can you set it up for me, please? Or it's like, no, me and my wife and someone else are starting a business. Then you're probably going to need what they call an SAA, a Sociedad Anónima, rather than an SRL, which is like a Sociedad Responsabilidad Limitada.
Okay.
SRL, kind of more one member. You can have 2 members to it, but really it's for like individuals kind of wanting a corp. And then again, you've got the Sociedad Anónimas, which are kind of for multiple and gets a little bit more complicated on that front. But the lawyer will be able to guide you on that. And basically in 3 days, they'll come back to you and go, okay, your business is registered. Here's your, what they call personalidad jurídica, which basically tells you who the legal representatives of the business for and can sign. And that's a document that you're going to get asked for all the time, because usually they only have validity of like 15 days or 30 days, depending on who you want to talk to. And so you're going to need one all the time. So when you go and open a bank account, you'll need one. When you go and get a telephone, you're going to need one. Like, they'll just keep asking. And you can go online to the government website and just pay like $6 and basically get it. But for people to know who can legally sign on a business.
Yeah. Okay. And you must have done that numerous times for larger businesses, smaller businesses.
I mean, I've structured individual businesses for myself up to, investment funds and, development corporations. And I've been down the rabbit hole, man, on many fronts.
So once you've got this set up, you've got your corporation set up, you've got your product, you're marketing it, you're maybe adding a few bucks on your AdWords account, you're driving traffic, you're generating a little bit of revenue. Could be direct. You could be selling apples, you could be selling paintings, you could be selling real estate. From there, what's the next step legally? I've got my bank account, it's just flowing in. What about?
Well, I think you need to get the bank account. You just said, like, it very flippantly, I would say, but like, it's not an easy process either. Like, an accountant needs to produce a cash flow forecast for you. The lawyer needs to basically provide you with like a document which shows you, that says this is the stock structure of the business, this is how it's set up, these are the owners, etc. And then with that, you go to the bank. It's a lot easier to open a bank account for a corporation than it is an individual. But once you have the corporation and you've had it a while, then you can get an individual bank account.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make sense.
I can imagine someone watching this podcast thinking, wow, this is already incredibly helpful because I really had no idea and I love Costa Rica. It seems that the value in having a lawyer that you trust, work with, and probably enjoy working with is actually quite important if you're going to reference this person a number of times.
And you need a lawyer and an accountant, man. Both of them. You need two good, because your accountant's going to help you with some docs, and then your lawyer's going to help you with other documents as well. Personally, to get started, the lawyer's more important, but then your accountant becomes more important after that, with tax filings and making sure the corporation has paid like its annual fees, etc.
Yeah. I guess people could reach out to you directly. I'm going to put your contact information at the end of this podcast, but I'm sure even someone now will be like, well, how do I get a lawyer, Richard? Where do I, there are certain websites. Am I going to just do a Google search, sponsored ads? How am I going to get screwed? Am I going to have to pay more money? How do you approach that?
Throw a stone, you'll hit a lawyer here in Costa Rica, man. I mean, they're everywhere, they're like realtors. I ask for a reference. I mean, you can ask multiple people. I mean, there are pretty good lawyers here. They have, they're very good. I mean, I think you're going to end up paying probably anywhere from $600 to $1,000 to set up your corporation.
Yeah.
It depends, like, where you're at in your business. I mean, personally, I use, Consortium Legal. I use Legal She, REB Alagals. Every single one has different strengths, should I say. But I mean, anybody that wants to, you can type in, lawyers in Costa Rica and you'll see it, find a list of them. But
sometimes I think it's really important not to forget that question, because a lot of people, we can take it for granted. We know a number of people who've been here for a very long time. But if you've just been here, you love it, you wanted to change the scenery, you've been here for a year or two, you've got a great idea, maybe you don't know those super simple questions that, as I say, we take for granted. When it comes to legal structures that are available for businesses, how have you gone about this? So take your example, starting real estate 3 or 4 years ago now. How do you work around that?
Well, I mean, I just have a corporation here in Costa Rica. I've had to register with SUHEF, which is like our SEC here, who oversees everything.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're doing, kind of a good job. But it really is simple once you've got past that. But it's not as easy as the US. I mean, I've opened, LLCs inside the US. I've opened corporations in Panama, Antigua, in the Caribbean, and the UK. I mean, I would say the most difficult is Panama, followed by Costa Rica, then probably, some of the Caribbean islands, and then, the UK, and then the US. The US is the easiest one. In 2 seconds, you open a US corporation. And a lot of people actually do open up a US corporation and have it be a flow-through entity down here to Costa Rica, which means that all of its income flows to Costa Rica, and then you only pay the taxes in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
But you can't be a US taxpayer to do that, I don't think. But anyway, you'd need to speak to a US CPA on it. But I think it just depends. I personally, if the clientele is here in Costa Rica, keep everything in Costa Rica. If your clientele is outside, I would probably look at having a US corp with a Costa Rican corp. Its costs are a little bit more expensive, but then you can leverage PayPal, Stripe, US bank accounts, credit cards, those kind of things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's not necessarily a tangible issue. And we are going to talk about tax in a minute, which can get quite complex. We'll try and simplify it. But how important really is the idea of patience? The Pura Vida lifestyle, you've said Panama is one of the most complicated, followed by Costa Rica. It's a slower system in general. The lifestyle takes a little bit of time. Some people can be really pissed off even after 10 years. You can get frustrated with banking, even just going to the bank in person. How important is that? And how do you explain that to your clients when they reach out to you?
I just say, look, guys, it's going to be difficult. Like, and mark my words now, once it gets done, you'll laugh at it. But like during the process, you won't. But the thing to understand is Costa Rica just joined the OECD a couple of years back and was kind of on a gray list, and now is on a green list. I suppose they call it a white list. I'm not sure what they call it. Yeah. But because of that, there's a lot of due diligence required and source of funds and documents, etc. So it's not the bank that's making it difficult. Like, it's the government that's making it difficult, because they just need to make sure that the money is clean,
of course,
and comes from a source. So I think it's, because we have investment funds, we have a lot of investors investing in from abroad. They send the funds in, and I say, guys, get ready for a bunch of documents. And sometimes here in Costa Rica, you can provide the documents and they don't like it. And then you just wait a couple of days and send the same documents, and then they accept it. Like, it doesn't make sense. Well, I had a client in the Czech Republic send me documents and everything was in Czech, and we sent it to the bank, and the bank was like, well, you need the client to go to the Costa Rican embassy in the Czech Republic, get it translated, get it authenticated. And I was like, you know what? Let me just put it through a Google translator here. Got it in English, sent it to the bank, and the bank was like, yep, that's cool. We accepted it. They didn't know that the Czech part, they just don't read Czech, but they read English and Spanish. So I just translated it using
But
PDF.
the fact that you did that, it's not really taking a risk. It's just knowing their limitations, and it's knowing what you can achieve. It's pretty simple.
This is the country of no a lot of the time. Like, it's with a famous British, thing, computer says no.
Yeah,
and then
that's right.
There's always a way around everything here, man. Always a way around everything.
Yeah.
And, I think that's just in life. There's always a way around everything. Most people just want to give up. But if you just keep at it, you'll find a solution.
You do, but you have to have the mentality and the optimism to believe that you'll get there. A lot of people will just at that first wall or that first no go, you know what, I can't be doing with this.
Look, I say this to people. I'm like, look, Costa Rica's difficult, but it's a natural filter for people doing bad stuff because it's not, if you want to like rip people off or do bad businesses, like this is not the country to do it, man. It's so difficult just to get started.
Yeah.
So it's like a natural filter for only people that really want to do stuff in Costa Rica. So typically what's here is pretty good and good people.
Yeah, totally agree. I love it. Great answers and super helpful information. So again, I am certainly not a tax expert, but I'm interested to summarize. Neither are you, but you've definitely got a lot of experiences. So if I ask the question at a very top level, how does the tax system work for businesses specifically?
Okay. We have a sales tax here in Costa Rica, which is 13%, IVA, IVA, which currently is 13%. So everything that you purchase, everything that you invoice is at 13%. So if someone says, hey, it's $1,000, it's usually $1,000 plus IVA, which is 1,130. Now that IVA just basically you have to pay every single month, but you have to get your income and your expenses IVA, and you just pay the difference between them basically. So it's actually a really good system from an accounting point of view, because in like North America or in the UK, you just get receipts and then your accountant types stuff in, and so the trust is in the accountant. Here, it doesn't work like that. Here, everything is electronic invoices. So you have a company or a name with an ID, and I don't know, Adam, say that I give services to you and you charge me $1,000, 1,130. And then basically I've got a service with someone else. The government's able to see all of this transactions happening backwards and forwards because it's via electronic billing, basically.
Yeah.
So at the end of the year, your accountant files your accounts and they just go into their system and go, how much was, paid to this company using electronic facturas, and how much did they also pay other people? And how does that look compared to their accounts? When there's a huge difference, they go audit. When there's probably not a huge difference, they just go, okay, everything's good. So good. It's a very easy see-through system in my mind.
Yeah.
That again, it's kind of auditing itself.
It is now. And I remember we've lived through this because I remember when the Factura Electronicas came in and the absolute colossal issue of getting that through, whether it was gas stations, whether it was the day-to-day. It was about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I can't remember how long it was.
Yeah, I can't remember.
But I remember before, and that's when accountants were typing up everything. And then, of course, bringing in the Factura Electronica. And yes, now it makes it a lot more easy now that it works. But again, in Costa Rica, the patience of transitioning.
Yeah, so you've got that IVA tax, and then again, you've got corporation tax. And corporation tax here in Costa Rica is typically staggered, if I'm correct. I think it's at like 10, 15, 25, and 30%, something like that, I think it is, or 15, 20, 25, I can't remember. But depending on how much your revenue is, depends on what percentage that you pay.
Yeah.
But you can also register as a PYME, which is like a small, medium-sized enterprise here, and actually get benefits from that as well. So my business is registered as a PYME, which is basically a small business. You get a bunch of tax breaks, you get access to basically favorable lending. And you actually, I think your social charges when you hire employees and have to pay social security to them, it's actually a less amount because you're a small business. But typically, basically, it depends on revenue. It has no impact on how much your taxable, basically, your taxable net profit is. It's just income. Meaning that I think once it jumps above, I can't remember the amount. I want to say it's $200,000. You're in the 30% mark. So as soon as your revenue is above 200,000, you're automatically paying 30%, on your net profit.
Yeah. PYMEs is a really good point. You'll find there's a lot of small local businesses, even if you're a tourist out and about, small shops, vendors, a lot of them will be that. And there is a lot of benefit for that. So that's probably very interesting. The more I listen to you speaking, the more value and the understanding of the importance of an accountant, as well as the lawyer from the get-go. If someone was interested in getting an accountant, I'm sure accountantscostarica.com, etc. But what is a typical relationship? How many hours are you going to be spending a month? And what might an accountant be charging you for a small business off the ground for the first 12 months?
Again, I think it depends how involved they are in your business. There are accountants that just basically do your EVA, which is your sales tax, and
Yeah.
then basically, your income expenses and give it to you. I mean, for something like that, I mean, you could pick that up for like 50 to $100 a month, man. But it's really simple work. I mean, they're just sucking in from an email address all
Yeah.
of the income expenses and then doing those filings. And then you start to get into, if you've got employees, whether you want them to manage the Social Security payments here with the CAJA, CAJA, which is the CAJA here, which is Social Security. Like if they're managing that, it gets a little bit more in depth. If you want them to then, I would say make payments or manage bank accounts, and giving them access to those kind of things. It just depends. I mean, I have companies because again, we manage, I don't know, probably like 20 different companies based on different structures and stuff.
Yeah.
Some of them are like $100 a month and others are $1,000 a month. $1,000 a month is, hey, money's come in, the bank's asking for due diligence docs, you go get them for me,
Yeah.
or it's kind of more strategic. It's more like a in-house accountant, if that makes sense, rather than outsourcing those services.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can relate. And for those of you watching, I also have an accountant on the independent side, and it is obviously a lot cheaper. Very simple relationship, month over month, submitting tax at the end of the year, tax year in Costa Rica around March time. And then, so as you say, up to 1,000, for example, but then they're doing an awful lot more for you. And obviously they're managing more responsibility. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Super helpful. I mean, this is great. We've already gone through some of the biggest questions. We've covered, 20 minutes. Guys, don't forget in the description, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can ask any question to myself or Richard, and he'll certainly have access to it. Same if you're watching this reposted on any social media platform. Please do get the questions in. We'll answer. And of course, wherever you're getting your podcast, listen along, subscribe, and then you'll find Richard's information as well there. So you can always reach out and actually check his podcast out as well. Rich, let's jump into a couple of questions, a little bit more about real estate and Costa Rica in 2024. What industries are thriving right now? 2024, where's it been a good year here?
Well, I mean, car company, like I would say kind of more cars, material goods. We work a lot with the owners of the, Toyota Purdy Group here in Pequeño Mundo. They're doing really, really well.
Yeah.
I think it's, Costa Rica is doing really well at the moment. Just the amount of money flowing into this country is insane. So I think any of those like household goods, cars, like living, like the bread and butter of like people's expenses, I think are doing very, very well.
Yeah.
I think they're probably the main industries that are doing really well. I mean, the tourism industry is doing pretty well as well. I think we're seeing a bit of a softening towards the end of this year. The low season. I'm about to actually do a webinar at the end of the year on the 30th of December. I don't know if this will come out before that, but a free webinar basically where we're looking at the data from 2024 and projections for 2025. And not to give everything away, 2024 was the high season was the best high season ever. But the low season was lower than previous year than 2023 as well, which is to be expected. And I think we'll continue to see that in 2025. Bigger high season, like lower low season, if that makes sense. We're going back to the seasonality we had pre-COVID.
Yeah, and this is the first time I think we've seen this in the low season, especially in the tourism sector. And then obviously with the depreciation of the dollar against the colon slightly, that's affected some of the local businesses. Two more questions regarding businesses before we look a little bit about real estate. If you're hiring, how easy is it to hire local employees here for your new business?
Well, let me preface this with saying that, like, you don't need to be a resident of Costa Rica to open a corporation and run a business here. Okay. So, like, as a foreigner, you can come in here, without residency, and you can basically open a corporation and you can hire employees. You register for CAJA, and that's where an accountant can help you as well.
Yeah.
You register with CAJA, and then when you employ someone, you then register them as an individual with their ID, and then every month you basically have to pay Social Security for them. But I'd say it's very easy to have employees here. The biggest shock is going to be, wow, every month I'm paying 30 to 35% extra, meaning if you're paying 1,000, you're paying 1,350. And also there's a 13th month as well. And you'd be like, what do you mean there's a 13th month? I mean, there is an obligated in December to pay them another month's salary, and it doesn't matter how well your business is done. It's just there's a 13th month that doesn't exist that you pay in the 12th month.
The famous aguinaldo, as they call it. Correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding of the aguinaldo for people who suddenly think, well, that's crazy, 13 month. Most local employees get paid twice a month on a 4-week basis, if I'm correct. So when you've paid 12 months, that's 48 weeks. So you're actually just filling in the remaining 4 weeks at the end of 52, which appears to be Christmas bonus, but it's actually just the workers missing days from the whole year accumulated.
I wish it was like that, Adam, but unfortunately, I mean, you can look at it that way, but
That's
it's
how I
just,
choose to look at it. Yeah.
I mean, it's like, for me, it's like, again, every month I make payments, on
Yeah.
the 25th of every month, I make
Yeah.
payments. I'm not paying every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm paying on the 15th of every month.
That's right.
So in December, if someone's earning £1,000, $1,000, I pay them £1,000 and then have to
Yeah.
pay them another $1,000. So I pay them $2,000.
Yeah. It, as well as hiring, if you weren't wanting to hire someone, it's also quite easy, as you mentioned, to hire an independent consultant for servicios profesionales, professional services, where you're not responsible for their social security.
But you need to be careful to not have that employer-employee relationship.
Yes. And the contracts usually expire after 90 days, potentially 3 months. It's not much longer, as I understand it.
Well, I mean, you can have someone for 6 months or 12 months kind of on it. It's just that you can't determine where they work. You can't give them,
That's right.
it needs to really truly be a independent contracting, relationship. It's not like the US, where I can't remember what it is. It's like a 1099 or 1066. I can't remember. I think it's a 1099, which is like basically as an independent worker. They do it a lot in Europe and they do it a lot in North America. Here, you have to understand it's a very socialist country. So, I mean, Panama's even worse, man. I mean, I had more problems with employees in Panama in like 3 years than I did in like 20 years in Costa Rica. So
that's good news for those investing in Costa Rica as a business.
I mean, look, my advice for people is when you're small, you might be able to get away with it. But as you start to get bigger, just employ people, because then again, you can determine they get work 48 hours a week, they get 12 days vacation a year by law. You can give them more than that, etc. But it's like, you don't want to kind of play that, because again, if you make an independent, like if the relationship is like an employee and then at the end it doesn't end well, they'll just walk over to Ministerio de Trabajo and just be like, no, I know he had a relationship with me as an independent consultant, we have a contract, but like he determined my hours, he told me what to do, etc. So
that's really good advice. That maybe when you're starting out, you're testing the waters. You want to see how viable your business might be. You want to save a little bit. You don't immediately want to invest in individual staff members. But as you grow, establish relationships that are going to benefit your business as well, and just be legally covered. Makes a lot of sense. And like you say, Costa Ricans, Ticos, are very proud of their social security as well, and what that involves with the Caja.
Look, I've used it. I mean, I got sick and wasn't able to work for months, dude. And I was able to use it. They still paid me.
Yeah.
When my kids got sick and they went into the hospital and then come out, and I was like, well, how much do I need to pay? Because I have private health insurance as well, but I use the public system here. Yeah. Because the public system for kids is great, dude. Like absolutely amazing. Yeah. And they came out and like, no, there's no bill. Like, that's what you pay taxes for. Like, you pay Social Security. And I'm like, wow, man, it's like being back in England.
Fantastic, right? I had the same thing 10 years ago with my knee injury, out of work for a little bit, and, coming out of surgery. I was like, oh, brilliant. I'm getting paid 80% here. And I'm just lying in bed. I mean, there you go. Yep. Can't complain. Hey, before we move on to a little bit of real estate, the last question I had regarding work is, what are some of the common problems that new entrepreneurs face when they're starting out?
Well, the language barrier is going to be a big thing, guys, as well. So, I mean, I think you need someone on whether that be an assistant, right-hand accountant, someone who's going to, it's going to get through some of those language barriers for you. Finding good staff as well, and reliable staff. I mean, I think that's just, a business is only as good as the people that are in it. So, I mean, finding great people and people that are they're gonna stick around. I mean, I think don't be too nice sometimes as a boss. Like, you want to be respected more than you want to be liked to an extent. I know that sounds a little weird. I mean, but don't be too nice and start treating people like it's still an employer-employee relationship. Keep it like that to begin. You can then develop that later on, but start off with that, because if you don't, and it's like the friendly kind of stuff, and different parts of Costa Rica are different. Like, Guanacaste is very relaxed. Like, people will turn up late or they just won't turn up, and that's it. Fire them. Like, they don't turn up, written warning. Don't turn up again, written warning. Next time, fire them. Don't give people an inch, because they will take a mile.
No, and that's generally solid business advice globally. I would say it doesn't really matter necessarily where you are, but
it's just a cultural difference here, man. It's just very different. You know, it's a very passive aggressive environment that we have here in Costa Rica, and it's the beauty of what makes it beautiful. But the aggressiveness that comes with that passiveness as well can get very frustrating.
Yeah, you make sure that you understand the position starting out, and I think, as you say, if you're successful in the years to come down the line, you've established a different relationship where you've built trust over, and then you can start to move into a different area perhaps with that individual and that relationship.
Get a good lawyer and get a good accountant.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the best advice so far from what I'm hearing at the start. I mean, and it does certainly help. It's like if you want to consider purchasing land, building a house, or you want to come down here, maybe invest in real estate, knowing Costa Rica and having the patience to do so, exploring a little bit, come down, spend a few months if you can, see if it's somewhere that you do want to be for the long run, especially if you're going to spend time with your business down here.
Yeah.
Excellent. No, I think this has been fantastic. So I did want to pick your brains a little bit since we last had a conversation back in October. Specifically, you've been in real estate very successfully, number of projects ongoing now for a number of years. How's the real estate market in Costa Rica evolved since COVID, which is about nearly 4.5 years now? Since the boom, it's come down very slightly. How's 2024 looked?
It's been good. I mean, it's I talked everyone's at different stages. So I always talk to lawyers and realtors because they're at the front end, because we're not realtors. We help people invest here in Costa Rica and we develop, but we're not realtors. We guide people. We're a realtor's worst nightmare, dude, because we know everything. And
you're telling the truth.
Your Jedi mind tricks don't work on us.
Yes.
And anyone can become a realtor in Costa Rica. And that's why it's just such a wild west. But basically, they are not seeing as many transactions. It's looking like 2019 again. So what's happening is we're moving from a seller's market, which was like 2022, 2023, probably early 2024, now into a buyer's market, and which means that the buyer now has the power in some areas of Costa Rica. There are some areas where this does not exist. So, it's become a buyer's area in like Santa Teresa. Anything that saw a significantly huger spike than other areas, now has kind of become a buyer's market. So that I think Jaco is definitely a buyer's market as well. Manuel Antonio not. I think that's a seller's market. There's just not that much product there. Uvita's become a buyer's market. Oaxaca is probably a buyer's market. Arenal, I think that's still a seller's market there, man. There's just so much opportunity there. And Monteverde has become a seller's market as well. Nosada, we're probably seeing a little bit, depending on like in the heart of Nosada, still a seller's market outside of buyers. Tamarindo, probably becoming a buyer's market. Playa Grande, sellers. Flamingo, probably a buyer's market. Just every market's different based on demand and supply, basically.
Yeah, no, for sure. So that's a really nice segue into my next question, which is if you were investing now, going into 2025, what are the top locations for real estate investment? Perhaps your top three.
Sure. Arenal, Monteverde, Manuel Antonio, and if I had enough money, meaning I wanted to spend millions, I'd go up into Papagayo.
Would you say, is that a surprise considering the last couple of years? Because you've just mentioned Arenal and Monteverde. Well, obviously Arenal is incredibly popular, tourism, one of the most visited areas of the country. Monteverde has been slightly more secluded over the last few decades, very popular for nature and wildlife. It certainly doesn't pop up in my head as a coastal town, that your typical beautiful property by the beach, 2 or 3 bedrooms.
Well, I mean, it depends what your goal is. Your goal is to have a place in Costa Rica that like you want to come down to. That's like wherever you want to go. But as an investment, like, we just look at real estate, we just look at tourism data. We sit down as, with Case, as Adam, who's, everyone's boss at Namo Travel, the CEO. And we look at like tourism data, from multiple different sources.
Yeah.
And then what that looks like from the cash flow perspective, because ultimately investment is its value is derived by its cash flow. So we're just looking for opportunity where cash flow is strong, where occupancy is strong, where average daily rates are strong, because that's going to dictate basically where the value is, and where also is the properties are undervalued based on that as well.
Yeah.
So we're always looking at a ratio between what does something cost and what would its cash flow be, and where there is like the biggest ratio there, that's basically where we go investing. Because I'm constantly investing, Adam.
I know this is why I've got you back on the pod, Rich. And so a slight curveball before I ask you my last question. How has the dollar depreciation, or the strength of the colon? We're talking, a couple of years ago, the dollar was approaching 700 colones, and now it's back to where it was. I remember when I nearly came, 500 colones about 15 years ago. How has that affected what you've seen, and has it at all? Other than because some work is being paid in dollars, that's a big issue.
It's impacted construction only, right? So right. I think anything that was built, pre-2022, was probably built at like $1,500 a square meter, which is probably like $1,600, $170 a square foot. Today, that's probably, $2,200
Yeah.
a square meter, or
Yeah.
$130, $240 a square foot, because of just the price of materials have gone. But the price of materials didn't spike like they did in the US here. We saw a little bit, but not that much. It's just really that the exchange rate, because we're having to buy certain things in colones. So usually the investment comes in dollars. We have to exchange it to colones. And then, of course, that's where it is. But I mean, I import a lot of stuff from dollars, man, because it's just so much easier for me to do.
Yeah.
Faucets, mattresses, sheets, towels, door handles, hinges, anything I can get in the US, and then I just ship it all down here, because I save myself about 30 or 40%.
Yeah, really, really good advice. And it's interesting to know. We've had a couple of questions regarding that, because obviously you see it when you're on the ground here, but it's interesting to see how it impacts different business and different sectors differently.
I think it's this. If your income is dollars, try and do everything in dollars that you can. Employees in dollars, like I have everyone in the business is in dollars, because the income is in dollars.
Yeah.
If your income is in colones, pay everything in colones.
Just makes it easier.
There's no currency risk.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Just keeps it
but
stable.
Also, I'm constantly hedging currency risk because we're constructing. So I get dollars.
Yeah.
And we're building. But what I do is, at 525, when it was 525 a couple of months back, I exchanged a couple of $1 million. I knew I had construction happening, and I wanted to look at it at that rate, which is great because it's at 500 today.
Yes. And you've foreseen that as well. And that was the way it was trending. So it wasn't that complicated.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to lock in the price. I budgeted my projects on that. And I was like, okay, well, I made 4% on it, but 4% on a couple of million, is nearly $100,000.
Now you're talking about a big difference. It makes a lot of sense. And again, that leads very nicely, because I was specifically asking about property prices here in Costa Rica. Do you see them expected to rise or stabilize? When I say the coming years, 2, 3, 4 years down the line?
I think they're going to go down, Adam. I think in some areas they're not, in some areas that they will. I think you're going to start to see in high tourism destinations. I don't think they will. I think that some areas might plateau, but like Playa Grande, man, I mean, it still continues to do well, just because there is water restrictions there, which means that you can't build new stuff. You can only build basically on lots that have water letters. So lots that 6 months ago were $260,000 today are $450, because there's so much demand for them, and there aren't that many available. Whereas in other areas like Uvita, dude, like I think we're going to see we're already seeing softening, but I think that softening is going to continue to happen.
Yeah. Hey, before I leave you, so I'm thinking we're approaching 2025, and my God, does the time pass, right? The travel agency where this podcast is hosting, 25 years in business. You're approaching 5 years since the pandemic in real estate. When you look at the size of Costa Rica, and we know there's only a finite amount of land here, there's obviously pockets to grow in some of these big names that you've mentioned, Jaco, Santa Teresa, Nosara, Arenal. Are there any couple of destinations that you think, man, in 5 or 10 years, there's going to be an investment or a small surge there?
I still think Arenal and Monteverde is underserved, dude. If I was going to take a punt, Playa Coyote, I think it's the new up and coming Tico
Whereabouts is that? Guanacaste?
It's up north of Santa Teresa, like a couple of beaches north of Santa Teresa. It's where all the locals with money are building homes on the front there. So I think Playa Coyote would be one that I would take a probably 10 to 20 year bet on. 5-year bet, probably Aviana's Playa Negra area. I think that's that area. And then I'm trying to think, maybe just south of Nosara, like Garza Esperanza, I think could be doing very well as well. I'd make a bit of a punt there. The city continues to grow out. I mean, maybe I'd be looking at around Grecia, San Ramon area. It continues to, everything keeps going next.
Yeah. The urban sprawl towards the beach very, very slowly.
I'm not a Caribbean guy, man. It just doesn't do it for me. So I personally wouldn't invest there. I know a lot of people are very hot on it.
It's also the infrastructure and the location, getting there. And until the infrastructure of the country enables you to actually not have issues with the roads and more connection with only one principal road in and out without the second one, that 32 needs a lot of work. And road network in Costa Rica, I don't see that changing very quickly in the near future. Yeah,
I don't know, man. It's just, sometimes I listen to my gut, and my gut just says don't do the Caribbean. But also is I don't know there aren't that many luxury hotels down there, and I'm always looking at tourism data because it dictates to me where real estate investment is. So where is the tourism data developing? Where is the demand? And and that's the great thing is we're able to see that further out. Based on a lot of data of seeing where are the tourists going? What's being developed? What's growing? Where's the occupancy and average daily rates growing the most? Because as soon as the tourists come, they go, I love this, I want to buy something. So you just create something around there. And I mean, that's basically what we're doing.
Yeah. Wonderful. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. I hope that this has been very helpful to a number of people, because no doubt it's a topic that's obviously hotly discussed. There's a million different chat rooms on Facebook, on different social media platforms about investing and starting a business. And obviously Costa Rica is still as popular as ever. I hope to get you on again in the not too distant future next year.
No worries, man. I appreciate your time and allowing me to share my barrage of information. And I know it's overwhelming. So anyone that wants to reach out to me just to chat, whether it's with me or my team, I always say I've got 15 minutes for everyone. It used to be 30. Now it's 15 just because it gave me...
Guys, exactly. Yeah. Jump on Richard Bexon before it gets down to 5 or 10 minutes, because you're not going to have that much time.
We're probably pretty close, Adam, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Guys, if you do want to check out Richard's podcast, please do check in the description box below, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening somewhere else, we will put all those links and make that available. Rich, as ever, thank you very much, mate, for your time. And I look forward to chatting again soon.
Appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.
Well, guys, I told you it was a very insightful conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it, learned a thing or two myself. And that's just the tip of the iceberg about starting your own business here in Costa Rica. If you do have any questions for me or for Richard, please do let us know directly in the descriptions, or you can find Richard's information as well to get in touch with him if you're interested in investing, or maybe you just want to subscribe to his podcast and follow along for those weekly episodes as well. It is incredibly interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. As ever, please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already done so, wherever you get your podcast. And I very much look forward to seeing and hearing from you, perhaps, in the not too distant future on our next episode. So from me, your host, Adam Baker, hasta la próxima.